So I'm doing a PhD at the ANU, sorry, on Pacific pottery. Sorry. And as part of my PhD, I've made a database for the ceramic fabrics. So images from the thin section collection it's held by the Bishop Museum of pottery from throughout the Pacific. And so by ceramic fabrics, I mean the minerals and the rock inclusions that are within the pottery. And so part of the database is the image gallery, image archive. And then there's also a Django database, which helps identify where the fabrics are from and the different levels of minerals and rocks within the different fabrics. And part of this database, like most other archaeological and heritage databases, uses a map so that you can search for the different sites and see the fabrics within them. But there are two major challenges when you're dealing with sites. One is trying to work out where the archaeologist meant when they give a site, because a lot of this is coming from pre-GPS coordinates. And the other challenge is, what level do you use? Do you use a site level, or do you group things by island or island group or country? And so in the first version of my database, if you wanted to see all the sites, all the ceramic fabrics within Guam, for instance, you had to there were check boxes so that you had to click every site that was in Guam so that you can look at Guam. And while I was presenting this database overseas, especially in Europe, where linked open data is more popular, someone said, well, have you thought about making the database linked open data? And so linked open data uses persistent and defined vocabularies. And these terms have to be identified by URIs and URLs, so website addresses, and they include things like classes like bibliography, like your citation references, and instances of classes like a war. But they have to be persistent, so they have to last for the foreseeable future. And the other thing about linked open data is that it's in a graph-based structure, so it's not relational database tables. And the data's in triple stores usually, and ideally meets models such as a SciDoc CRM. And this idea, or at least the idea of having a persistent and defined vocabulary, appealed to me because I used to be a molecular biologist and a bioinformatician, and our databases in molecular biology are a lot more interlinked than the general archaeology databases. So you can jump from one database to another, and we have tools that allow you to put in gene lists and translate them from one identifier to the other. And I've really been missing these tools in archaeology. And so I like the idea of trying to have more defined vocabularies. And I didn't like the idea, and I do have to create some persistent identifiers for especially my ceramic fabrics. But the idea of linked open data is that you use other people's vocabulary so that you can interlink the data. And locations is the most obvious. And so I started looking around for what persistent identifiers are out there for locations. And Wikidata has some of the nicest persistent identifiers for everything, including locations. So in Wikidata, you have your classes are defined by and your instances are defined by your Q numbers, and your properties are defined by your P numbers. And Wikidata is very good in that it allows you to interconvert between identifiers. And so you have your Wikidata ID, but you can also have your Geonames ID and your Getty Thesaurus ID. And use your Sparkle queries to try and make tables of all your IDs so that you can easily interconvert from one to another. Sparkle queries, which is the language for linked open data queries, are not the nicest queries for your non-computer programmer. They are becoming easier to write, especially with the AI tools, but you do really have to understand the structure of the data. And Wikidata does have, so I started looking, well, do they have archaeological sites? Because especially for the Pacific, if they have the archaeological sites that I'm using in there, it's going to make my life a lot easier. So they do have a class called Archaeological Site, and the countries or the territories associated with the USA have quite nice examples of their archaeological sites from Hawaii and Guam. For other countries and territories in the Pacific, there's barely any. The famous Lapita site is there, but because it's New Caledonia, it goes under France via New Caledonia. And the famous Tayuma site from Vanuatu is actually an instance of cemetery rather than archaeological site, and there are no sites for Fiji. So it would be really nice to start adding archaeological sites, but I would really like to make sure that some of the museums, like Museum Papua New Guinea, are on board with that. They do have, so Wikidata also has countries. As I said, you've got, I'm sorry, yeah, they have countries, but you do have to distinguish what is a country, like the Solomon Islands, and what is a territory, because it affects how you do your queries. And you have islands and island groups, and you do have different types of islands. And so again, you have to understand the structure when you're doing your queries so that you can make sure you capture all these. But it is one answer to this level of hierarchies and searching, so that you can, if you want to search for fabrics or anything by island group, you can get your fabrics. And if you want to search by island or site, in theory, you can get your fabrics. And it links, as I said, to the Geonames and Getty Thesaurus. So while I was looking for identifiers, you've probably seen the Pacific Archaeology Archaeological Radiocarbon database came out. And they also had sort of similar problems. And one of their main location identifiers was island, because that's the natural thing for the Pacific. And they used the Nunn et al. Database to identify their islands. And then that database, which is basically a spreadsheet, also has the rock types of the islands. So I thought, well, this would be a really interesting experiment to see if I can take their list of islands and easily see if I can find my islands and my sites within their database and match up, and how easy that is to do. And so the Nunn database use island name, latitude and longitude to identify their islands. And so first I want to see what percentage of their islands have Getty IDs, keeping in mind that the Getty Thesaurus is designed to annotate islands involved or that have heritage, and most Pacific islands don't have evidence of inhabitation. And that's sort of shown here that, again, Hawaii and many of the territories associated with the US are well represented in the Getty Thesaurus, but many of the islands of the Solomon Islands and PNG don't have Getty IDs. Another location database is the Global Islands, and that is ideal in that it has the polygon outline, vector outline. And this is very good for if you want to work out if an island is one island or two islands. So some databases will classify this island as two islands. And it has at least 3 IDs and 3 names. And you can see here with this island that the names are all different. And this was really borne out when I compared the names that the Nunn database were using, the different names in the Global Island database, the Getty, Wikidata and Geonames. Many islands have different names, and sometimes this is just varied spelling. Sometimes you get multiple islands with the same name, even within the same country, which is very confusing. You can have multiple names for one island, often an English name and a local name. But even more annoying is that sometimes you can get variations within an island group on which island is which. And so the Duff Islands in the Solomon Islands, there's this group here and no one can quite decide which is Obelisk Island. So Map Carter have it in the middle of nowhere. GeoNames base map has it here, but the actual ID is number 2 down the bottom, and it's different in every database. And so I don't actually know which one is Obelisk. So names are really not the best identifiers for islands. So Wikidata was missing some. It had all the islands, virtually all of them that were in the Nunn database. It didn't have names for them all. So I've added names for them all and geonames. And so I did make one big spreadsheet of all the names and I've just deposited it. But I could also then use it to classify my islands by the rock type within the from the Nunn database. And so I've added that into my islands. And it did also make me rethink how I was grouping my sites. And so I've gone from using a multiple selection to having more of a hierarchical structure so that you can now click island groups and see all the ceramic fabrics for the sites within that island group. And I've introduced links directly to the GeoNames IDs and the Wikidata ID and Getty Thesaurus, and I've even added in the MinDat locality ID and used the latitude and longitude so that I have a link to the macrostrat geological map. And I want to keep pushing this further and trying to link to other databases like the Vanuatu, which has geochemical signatures, the Lepida database, or any especially that have a site identifier, and so that you can just jump directly from my database to the other databases. So in conclusion, I think Wikidata can be a useful way to match up identifiers. I should say, so one of the strengths that is also a huge weakness with Wikidata is that anyone can edit it. So this is good because it's in a way less colonial because it's not just limited to Europeans. And actually most of the island data comes from the Filipino Wikipedia. And so, yes, if you're lacking identifiers, it can be a way for you to create persistent identifiers without relying on your university to keep them there forever. But the disadvantage is that anyone can edit it so they can move a Pacific island to the middle of Sydney Harbour, which would be annoying. So Wikidata, it also has the potential to provide unique identifiers for Pacific archaeological sites, which again would help us link all the data that we have on these different Pacific archaeological sites together and make it easier to jump from one information site to another. For Pacific Islands, the Getty Thesaurus, the IDs are superior to names, but they're not available for all sites in a data set, and even for sites that I have that were obviously inhabited at one time because they have evidence of pottery. And again, yeah, the wiki as I said, the Wikidata IDs are superior to names, but they can be edited by anyone, and I think you have to keep that in mind. And that's the end.
Great. Thank